So this is the week 1 attendance video, but I want to show you just a little bit of the backstory of what happens when you complete the welcome and you watch my video for that and you submit the assignment. And again, this assignment is your GitHub username. And this is important. All you need to do here is give me just the GitHub username itself. You could do it in comments, but it just works better probably for me if you do it here. You submit that assignment. Now what this will show you immediately, and there you could either hit next here or you could go back to the course, but I like to go here to the course because what this really shows you is that this course, and I've said this in the welcome, is set up to enforce sequential movement through the items per week. So you have to complete this before you can come into this attendance. Okay, so you have already done that. I'm just showing you a little bit of the backstory because as I click into this attendance, and I'm recording this now, I'm going to walk you through what happens, because when you submit your GitHub username, depending on when it is. Now this first assignment is due on the first day of the semester. I generally release the course a week, maybe 2, before the start of the semester so students can actually do this step. So just know that if you're in here on August 12th in the late afternoon, early evening, I'm not going to see your submission and you won't be able to complete the next item, but that's okay. The next morning I will do and you can get started. But my point is that if possible, do this beforehand. Okay, so once you do that first step, then what I do is I invite you, and I'll just show you kind of what I do is inside of here under people, and again, you won't have access to this, I invite a member. Okay, and so when I invite a member, now I'm already in so I can't do it, but you know, I'll put in your username and it'll be an invite, and then what that should trigger as soon as I do it is an email to you. And then what you want to do is hopefully see that email and go ahead and accept the invitation. But if for some reason, because once I invite you, I will go into the item in Canvas and I will tell you, hey, I've invited you, and so you can go ahead and accept. Okay, so if for some reason I've told you I've invited you, but you don't see it, just click into this link, which takes you right into the course organization. So in GitHub, if you've never used it, I hope this is a good introduction because it's used in so many different contexts around data science, data analytics, and definitely around web development. So learning it is a good idea. But in this case, when we're in this repo, right, you have your own GitHub, so you have your own GitHub space, which for me, right, is my name. Right, but what we're going to be doing, and you could do work in here that is all on your own. You can actually create public and private repos, which you'll learn about in a minute. But when you're in this one, right, 28, this is the one used for our course. Okay, so just to kind of help you understand the difference, because I say that because what you're about to do is you're going to create a private repo within our GitHub organization. So don't do this step in your own GitHub, do it in our course organization, so making sure you're at that right location. Okay, so now I'm going to have you create this for our weekly work. It is definitely something we will use again and almost for every assignment, honestly. So it'll be important for you to get this part done. And also follow my naming standards. Okay, here it should be standards. So it's your first name and the first letter of your last name plus add together dash private, so that when you see it, you know, oh, that's my private repo. So we'll do this step first, and then I'll show you how to create another file that's needed. Okay, so in GitHub on our organization, what you will do is you'll come into repositories. Now in this case we call it repos, and you have two kinds, public repos and private repos. Now if you're the first person to have accepted the invitation, or even if you're the 10th, You will only see this one probably. Now there may have been something else I've added because we're only going to create for this first step a private repo. And these private repos are between you and I. And that's what I want you to understand. We'll most likely create a public one for later. But for now, we're just going to create a private one. So let's actually walk through this to show you. Okay. So under here, you're going to go new repo. Okay. We're not going to use a template, and in this case, this would be your first name, first letter of your last name, .pri. And again, keep it lowercase. Okay, and now there's various reasons why we do this. Just FYI, and it kind of gives you a little funny, how you could create something inspirational, but I give you a standard. So in this case, I'm going to say Rhea Waller's private repo for 28. Okay, and it defaults to private, so you don't have to do that. And I'm going to have you add a README file. Now this README file is great because it'll give us ways to, and this is what we call a markdown file, something you'll learn about later, but we'll just by default put it in there. And then we're going to add a get ignore, and in this case we're going to say none. Okay, so we're going to add a get ignore. I'm going to show you how to actually populate that in a minute so you can see that. Let's see, can I do none? I think so. Okay, and then license will be none. And this is going to talk about the branch. This is something you'll learn about as you learn more about GitHub. Okay, and you're creating a private repo. So if you see all of this verbiage on your screen, it may have changed a little bit by the time you get here, but in general, this is what you should see. So now you'll create it. And so what this will do is it'll fire up a process or fire a process that actually creates this repo. Now in some senses for students who don't have any GitHub experience, this is going to feel just like a folder. But it's a special kind of folder you'll learn about as we move through the course for basically doing version control. So in this case, oh yeah, it didn't show me the get ignore. Okay, that's good to know because we're actually going to create it ourselves. And so in here you can see that it's private. Now if I go back to the default of 28, to the beginning of it, I can see there's a new repo that's added, but because it's private, you won't be able to see it. And again, yours will only be viewed between you and I. Okay? All right, so let's go back here. So now that we've done this, right, now we're going to do that get ignore. I was thinking it would create it, but I guess it didn't. Okay, so we're going to do this. So this is a weird kind of file that you'll learn about the more you do GitHub. And it's basically a way to say, hey, there's some files on our folder, our repo, that we want you not to track. And track is an important part of what we're doing in this class or what we're doing in something like GitHub, or in the case of using it from a command line using the git commands. But inside here we're saying, hey, there's some things we don't want you to track. Okay? So if I click this, what I see, hold on. Okay, so when you click on that, you'll be brought to another file that's on somebody else's repo that we're going to actually just copy. So if you copy all the content here, and basically again, this is just saying, hey, VS Code itself, which we haven't even done VS Code yet, so we're doing a little bit of pre-setup. We're saying these files, these JSON setting and task and some other things, yeah, don't even track them. The history don't, and extensions don't. So we'll copy that, and then we'll come back to our repo that you just created. So I'm going to come back in here, and now I'm going to create a file. Okay, so in this case, there's a couple of ways we can do this. There's actually a little plus up here. And if we hit plus, it's going to say create new file. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file, and this file name is going to be a little different than probably what you've seen. You start with a dot, get ignore. Okay, and this is where before I was thinking it would just create the file, and it didn't. That's okay, right? And there's templates for common usage, but in this case I'm surprised VS Code isn't here, but it's not. So we'll just paste, go back over here again, copy that, and paste it in here. Okay, So you've created your first file. It's kind of a different file. You'll create definitely more files as we go along. And then what you do here is you're going to commit this change. So this is already getting you used to the idea of version control. And by default, we'll just say, we'll leave this as it is. You will learn more about what I require as far as GitHub messages and stuff later. And we'll go ahead and commit it into the main branch, and we'll hit commit. Now basically what this is doing is it's saving the changes that you just did, and now you can actually see that file as it exists in your repo. Okay, so now let's go back to attendance, because we're actually towards the end of what you need to do for this first attendance assignment. Okay, so we're doing a little pre-setup basically. So in this course, for the very beginning, and then we'll kind of see how this goes, we're going to use something called code spaces. Now, for many students who take my more web, because I focus, as I've said to you, on the web development programming, that's what I teach, but this class is also for the data analytics students. But in this case, students will often set up what's called a local dev environment. But what I'm going to do this year, because I just think this course would lend itself maybe better for this, is we're going to use something that GitHub provides for free called a code space. It's basically that GitHub is giving us, in this case, a computer that's out on the cloud that we can use, right? And now what's great about this code spaces is that if you go to another computer and you need to do some work, you can actually use this code space anywhere you can log into GitHub, and it has minimum requirements, okay? So I just want to give you the idea here, because we're actually going to we're going to take, and I'm going to close this file now. In here, for this private repo, we're going to do this step of creating this code space. Now all we're going to do in this first step is actually just create it, and then we'll do some more work with it as we go through. So over here, in fact, I'm going to decrease my resolution just a little bit just so we can see it, and I'm going to make sure I'm here. Yeah, I needed to click back on the repo name itself for some reason, I guess because I had clicked into the image or somewhere. But if you come back here, you know you're in the right place to get started when you see the code, the green code button. So if you come over to code, by default, it's going to do a clone, and clone is where you do it locally, and we're not going to do that for this stage. Again, if you want to learn about cloning and how to do that, I'm going to offer that content later in the coming weeks. But for this first place, I'm just going to have you set up a code space. So instead of doing it locally, which ties you to your local system to get work done, we're going to set up a code space. Okay, for this one there's no code space, so I'm going to go ahead, and by the way, this says it's paid for, and it's just paid for by the GitHub organization for me, which is educational. I'll talk more about some limitations that apply here, but I just want you to know, right, that's what it's not, you're not being charged for this. This is something that we get because of being in education. Okay, so again, we're not doing local. Click on code spaces and then click create code space on main. And main is the branch, as we said here. There's other branches, typically not something we do for a class like this, but the more advanced you might become. The more advanced, the more things you do on Git and GitHub. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the code space. Now it's going to take you into a new tab. And this is actually VS Code. Okay, VS Code is an editor that is the most commonly used code editor around. If you've done, like for data analytics, maybe you've done Jupyter, or maybe you've done Colab, or maybe you've done other cloud-based things. But basically what this is, and it's kind of cute, it gives you a name, like Sturdy Stickfish, right? So what it did is it took the files that were in, and I'm just going to click off of here, your GitHub, right? And it created a new, and it's, again, think about this as a computer, because it is separate, because it's basically copied this into this space, okay, this URL here, but basically is a computer that you now have here. Right? And then we're going to learn more and more about this as we go through these weeks, but I'll teach you about how to actually, once you code in here, right? And we're going to learn different ways for this class of doing writing code, knowing how to deal with databases, knowing how to write SQL, SQL, SQLs, queries, and a lot of other stuff. But for our purposes for now, we just wanted to have you set it up. But one thing I do like to do is I like to come in here and I like to do themes because I don't like this white. But what's nice is that, and it's just too much on my eyes, so I typically like to use something like this. And notice how that changes, and what will happen here is that that is saved into your setup here. Okay? Now we haven't done anything in here. We've only set it up. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through in the next assignment actually how to go through and do work in here and eventually have that work end up over here. And the reason we do that is because this is the ultimate place you submit your work to me. Because here's what I want you to understand. I won't see this. This is really just for you to have this VS Code editor for you to use to do work. And again, the nice thing here is you could go to another computer if you were at somebody's house the night something was due and you're like, oh, I forgot to do that. Hey, I can just jump on and do it here. But again, you'll learn more about it as we move through. Okay, now the other thing is if you're done with it, I definitely recommend, right? And we haven't saved anything. I'll teach you more about this. But if you're done, right, and you haven't, you'll learn this later, push your code back here, right? You can, because it'll save, just close it. There's other ways to do this, right? But for now, we're just going to close it, okay? And now when I do that, it still exists. It actually still exists. Matter of fact, it should give us the code name here. Maybe it just didn't refresh with that code name that we had set up. There it is. It took it a minute. And notice how it's active, right? So this is something we'll learn more about. And in this case, you'll learn more. Look, there's a lot of things we could do with this, but one of the things, because you'll learn about how you can actually choose, sorry, let's go back in here, how you can actually choose, I wouldn't choose machine types or anything like that. One thing I'm going to try to get in the habit of is when I get out is just to, and I think this will work fine, is just to, because like right now, even though I've closed the tab, and after 30 minutes, it will actually become inactive. But if I don't want to waste those 30 minutes that you'll learn about, I can just say stop it, okay? And when I do that, I come back in here, I still see it. It's no longer active, shows me it was 4 minutes ago, but I could fire it up again. But when it does that, it has to what's called spin that up. But notice when it did that, it actually kept that setting that I had done. Okay, and it takes it a minute here. Now this is where you're definitely dependent upon your internet for having this set up. So the slower your internet is, the more, you'll probably maybe want to think about doing a local install when I teach about that option. Okay. All right, again, I'm going to close it just for the, oh, I should have actually still been on GitHub just so I could have done that step. And I think it's just good practice, and I will, for me, I'm going to try to do that, and I'll show you why. I've talked about it a little bit here. But see, it's active, and so I could come in here and I could just say stop it. Okay, so again, it's fired up a virtual computer for me to use. Okay, so now, boom, now you're down to the last two items. So what you want to do here is you want to reply to this post and tell us, right, were you successful in setting up, and I'll modify this, setting up GitHub code spaces, and if not, ask for any help that's needed, right? And then say hello and introduce yourself, like do that here. Okay, now attendance is minor points, but in this case we're doing a little pre-work, so it is very important because you can't do the next assignment until you do that. So tell us, were you successful, and ask for help if needed, and then say hello and introduce yourself and why you're here, and any other thing you'd want to know, let us know about you in this for the class to know. So anyway, thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you on the next one.